everyone. I am doing the critique portion of the roundtable this week. The first question is to discuss the strengths and weaknesses of the study. I thought it was incredibly thoroughly done. They covered the bases that they said that they would cover, and the questions that they presented to the groups were very thought through. They had follow-up questions for every question, just in case they missed something. Well, the weaknesses, one of the things I thought that they could have used was more of leadership roles and seeing how that correlates into their organization. Mainly because they focused on nurses and residents, things like that, but I'm not too sure how hospitals work in their way of leadership. So I thought that if they were to present more of a leader role, it would give us a little bit better of an idea of their communication, who sets up those kind of talks. Also, they mention at the end that their findings do not relate to other portions of the hospital, but they share findings from other researchers. So even though that they did share the findings from other researchers, and they provided us where to go with them, I think that if they added a little bit more, it would give us a full rounded idea of how it is in the hospital. But I think that's more of a personal thing. I don't know. The second question is, do the results support the conclusions? It does. They found exactly the answers that they needed to their questions. Right from the beginning, they were going through how they did it, why they did it, and each section ended with what their findings were, and at the end their conclusion all went to like one big hurrah, if you will. Are there any inconsistencies or methodological shortcomings? This is a hard one to be on the critique end of it because it is short and they did their work well. Including the questions they asked, how they sectioned off the groups to make everyone feel comfortable speaking in their space. It's hard to spot any inconsistency. There could have been more gender-specific questions to help answer their gender concerns that they presented in the beginning, but at the end they mentioned this statement that kind of summed it up on why there was a high percentage of female participants in the nurse and resident focus groups compared with the attended focus group. This distribution approximates the gender distribution in these roles in this study institution, which may have limited us from exploring gender issues, particularly relevant to power and hierarchy that have been addressed in other studies. So again, they kind of relate to other studies, which is great, but I think if they were to ask the question more specifically on gender, they would have gotten the answer that they were looking for. After that, consider whether the conclusions are supported by the data presented. I put the conclusion is pretty much the data. As I said earlier, through each section they kind of summarize it with what they found. They present their findings for how SBAR works, how the geography was a big role in making it easy to find each other and know who is in charge of the patient, and the agreement of how to care for the patient. So, yeah, I believe that their data was very presented. The conclusions were supported. And lastly, do you see any alternative ways to analyze the data that might cause us to question the study's finding? Alternative ways would be looking at other studies mentioned in different parts of the hospital and see what difference it could make in their findings. Otherwise, I thought it was a thoroughly done study. But I'm excited to hear from every one of you and respond, and have a good rest of your day or night. Thanks.